The Texan, a Warrior Series short story, Book 5, by Patterson, Chapter 1. Roger ducked the fist swinging at him, but he wasn't fast enough. That's not right, he thought groggily, as it sank deep inside his gut and doubled him over. I wasn't expecting it. He gasped and tried to stand, tried to turn away from a fast movement, but something crashed into him, and he went down in a heap. A metal-toed boot caught him in the side and slid him a couple of inches in the dirt. He coughed, groaned, and drew his hands over his face, trying to peer in the night. "Who are you?" He saw the boot stomping down on him, too late, and darkness fell. It had started 2 weeks ago, back in New York. Roger was lounging in their office on Columbus Avenue, his feet on a table, when Megan slapped a letter beside him. They were the Agency, an elite, black ops, counterterrorism outfit that combated more than terrorism. The Agency went after international criminals, drug runners, human traffickers, arms dealers, anyone who was a threat to national security and a threat to international allies too. There were 8 of them in the group, with Zeb Carter, the lead operative who had formed the team. Broker, ex-Ranger, their intelligence analyst, was the oldest of them all, in his late 40s. The team included Bwana, Roger, Bear, and Chloe, a couple, and lastly, Beth and Megan Patterson, twins, who not only worked with Broker on the intel side, but also ran the logistics. All but 4 of them were former Special Forces operatives. Broker had been with the Rangers, Chloe with the 82nd Airborne, and the twins came from a cop family. The Agency was headed by Claire, its first female director. Claire never gave out her last name, and one look at her ice-gray eyes was enough to deter anyone from asking. She reported to only one man, the president, and barely a handful of people knew of her or the Agency's clandestine existence. The New York office sported the name of a private security consulting firm. The firm worked with corporate clients and advised them on perimeter, executive, and cyber security. The firm was genuine, as were its clients, and the 8 operatives were employed by the firm. It was the cover Zeb had conceived when Claire had recruited him and had given him the mandate of restructuring the original Agency to have a near-zero admin footprint. The Columbus Avenue office was wholly owned by the 8 of them, as was a Gulfstream and several other assets and investments, all funded by a grateful Middle Eastern royal whose daughter they had rescued from a slavery ring. Roger had picked up the letter, frowning, and studied the postmark. It came from Texas, his home state, and was addressed to one Roger Feardon. Roger never gave out his second name, no Agency operative did, other than Zeb. Looks like there's someone else out there who knows me. He studied the white envelope for a few more moments, trying to figure out what lay inside. In the days of email and cell phone communications, letters were fast becoming extinct. "I'm sure it won't bite you if you open it," Beth snickered, seeing his hesitation. Snarky. The Patterson twins had a lot of it. He ripped open the letter, extracted the single sheet, and read it swiftly. He stared at it for long moments and didn't resist when Bwana took the sheet from his hands. The Agency was a very tight-knit family. Bwana was like a brother. There were no secrets between them. Bwana whistled softly when he finished reading and passed the letter on to Megan. "What are you going to do, bro?" "He should go. What's there to decide?" Megan piped up. "Zeb," she called out, when their lead operative entered the office. "Roger has inherited property in his hometown. There are some loose ends he needs to tie up." Zeb scanned the letter, sent by a lawyer in Crown Butte. A house and a farm, with him the sole survivor. Foster parents died, and it took a long time to track Roger down. Zeb read the salient bits and handed the missive back. They knew Roger's background. He was an orphan raised by foster parents, passed from one family to another, none of whom had treated him well. The last family had been the worst. They had initially taken him as a foster child and had then adopted him. They had gone on to subject him to vicious physical and emotional abuse. Roger had fled his home when he had turned 18 and had joined the army. There, he had found himself. Years later, he had met Bwana and had found a brother. After that, the agency became his family. "Go," Zeb told him. "There's nothing burning." They had come off a mission. Nothing else was green-lighted. The corporate clients could be dealt with by the others. Roger didn't go immediately. He slept on it for a few days, discussed it with others. On the one hand, he wanted nothing to do with his foster family, even the inheritance. On the other, if he didn't address the property issues, they would keep hanging like a millstone around his neck. "If you don't, I will," Bwana threatened him one night, and that decided it for him. He took their Gulfstream to Dallas, where a man awaited him with a SUV. They had such men and such SUVs in the major cities of the country and several international ones. Each vehicle was armored, had run-flat tires, and could withstand assault rifle fire. They had various gadgets that would feel at home in the Batmobile. The vehicles were kept in veteran-owned garages, who delivered the vehicle before each mission, retrieved and serviced it, and kept it ready for the next outing. The garage owners, all vetted by broker and the twins, were paid from a special investment fund. A 4-hour drive that took him closer to the Mexican border as the sun set and darkness grew brought him to his hometown. Crown Butte wasn't big. Many maps didn't register it. It had close to 5,000 people, many of whom owned farms. There were a few small industrial units out of town, packing companies, meat processors, several office blocks, a high school that had a stadium where its football team played. It was like hundreds of such small towns across America. Neighbors knew each other, stopped to talk about kids and schools and their football team. It had a main street which was lined with retail and civic establishments. Streets leading off Main Street which held residences in the main urban area. More houses were scattered outside the immediate neighborhood. The last street, on the edge of the urban part of the town, was where Roger's home was. "My foster family's home," he thought bitterly as he parked his vehicle on the drive of the Clapper building, 2 floors high. The property was large. 4 bedrooms, a generous front and backyard. A lot of space separating it from its nearest neighbor, to its left. A lone tree and darkness on its right. Roger hung around and paced, reluctant to enter the house. He went over to the tree and stood, trying to force himself. And it was there that he was attacked. Chapter 2. He heard the sound of pounding footsteps from behind. 1 set. No, definitely 2. He still wasn't worried. Small town. Crime rate that didn't move the needle. What was there to be concerned about? The first shadowy figure came, full tilt, and didn't even stop. He slammed into Roger and took him down. An elbow crashed into his face before he could evade it. A head butted him on the forehead. He grabbed an arm and applied a lock, prepared to heave the attacker away when the second assailant appeared. A boot struck him in the side so hard that he thought a rib cracked. He groaned, and his lock slipped. The first man sensed an opening and kneed him in the groin. The second man kept kicking him. "Who are you?" A third man, hood over his face, stood over him and crashed a boot into him. Roger didn't know how long he was out. His watch had stopped working when he came to. He spat gravel from his mouth and felt his teeth with his tongue. They seemed okay. He had instinctively turned his head at the last moment and had taken the kick on the side of his face. He didn't have to touch his face to feel the swelling. It would turn black and blue by the morning. His eyes had survived any damage. He flexed his arms, still functional. He straightened a leg. The limb worked. He took a deep breath, and that sent fire racing through him. Ribs. Definitely ribs. He breathed shallowly through his mouth, rose gingerly, and stood swaying for a moment. There wasn't a soul in sight. His assailants had disappeared. Nothing moved on the street. The few homes on it were lit from within. Dinner, TV, bedtime, the things normal families did. What would I know of that? He thrust down the bile that rose within him. Bitterness wasn't an emotion he entertained. Neither was regret. Ever since he had joined the agency, he had eliminated those emotions from within. They surfaced on such rare occasions. He hobbled to his vehicle, refusing to look at the house, and felt around for a can of water. He washed his face and hands, and then clambered inside. He turned on the dome light, removed his jacket and tee, and inspected his chest and abdomen. Wicked-looking bruises on his ribs. Skin cracked and bleeding in a few places. He felt his sides delicately, and a dull pain spread through him. He tried taking another deep breath. It hurt, but not as much as earlier. If I'm lucky, no cracked ribs. I am lucky, he corrected himself. It could have been far worse. He got out of the vehicle and washed his upper body as best as he could. The SUV had a medical kit that he used to dress his wounds and strap his chest. He pulled out a spare tee and donned it. 10 p.m., the clock on the dash read. Been out for nearly half an hour. Reached the town at 9. He tried to work out why anyone would attack him. His foster parents were long dead. He had no contact with them ever since he had run away. He had no living relations, no enemies in the region that he knew of. He hadn't been followed from Dallas. Not that I was paying any great attention, but I would have known. Shadowing over 4 hours on highways isn't easy. No, it must be someone local, maybe a case of mistaken identity. He gave up, went to the rear bench seat, spread out a blanket, and lay down. His Glock was next to him, within easy reach, and his last thought was, "Welcome to Crown Butte." Roger woke early the next day and lay still for several minutes. All was quiet around him. In the far distance, he could hear a vehicle start and drive away. He thought he heard the throbbing of a tractor, but couldn't be sure. He lay unmoving as the sun's rays grew brighter, and thin tendrils of gold entered the vehicle's windows. Rising stiffly, he stretched as best as he could, given his injuries and the cramped space, and got out. His vehicle was parked facing the house, and when he emerged, he saw the first town person. A woman, 3 houses away, not close enough to greet him or notice the state of his face. She was shading her eyes with a hand as she looked in his direction. Hurried inside her home when she felt his eyes. Roger peered at himself in the vehicle's mirror and grimaced. He was tall, just 6 feet and an inch, and had stylish blonde hair. Green eyes, a strong jaw, clean-shaven, looks that attracted female attention. Attention that he wasn't averse to. He liked to dress well, and that along with his looks and a ready smile, drew women towards him. Those who didn't know him well considered him to be a playboy. He made no attempt to correct them. Only his friends knew he was devoted to Jenny Earle, his longtime girlfriend in New York. Jenny was a curator in the scientific research section of the Museum of Modern Art. Roger was a science aficionado. That was how they had met. He washed his face, toweled himself dry, wore his shades, and drove out to the nearest diner. It was on Main Street, its sign boasting that it was the best eatery in town. It had 20 tables, white cloths draping them, cutlery neatly arranged. Reasonably full at 8 a.m. Workers in overalls. A few men in suits, a few families. Roger ordered the works, potatoes, bacon, eggs, coffee, lots of it. The waitress, a young girl in a red and white uniform, took his order, tucked her pencil behind an ear, and hurried off. Her eyes didn't linger on his bruises, which the shades didn't conceal. "That feel as bad as it looks?" A man in a pair of overalls queried from another table, his eyes quizzical above his coffee mug. "Yeah," Roger answered. "Took up boxing. Thought I was Muhammad Ali. Don't think that now." The man grinned. "I know what you mean, buddy. Boxing ain't my game. I tried that karate stuff one time. Thought it would be easy to break boards. What with my size and all." He gestured self-deprecatingly at his gut. The board didn't agree. He guffawed loudly, wished Roger a good morning, and left. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the town's more welcoming than my reception suggested. Roger dawdled over his coffee, considering his next moves. He had to meet the lawyer. He hoped that he could finish his discussions with him in an hour. Then he would meet a realtor. Sometime in the night, as he slept, his made his mind. He would sell the property as quickly as possible, give the proceeds to a veterans fund. Then he would be free of the past. But before that, he would do what any self-respecting Special Forces operative would do. He would go to the cops. The police station was just off Main Street, in a tree-lined dead end, in which were several parked vehicles. The building was white-walled, and was a welcome respite from the heat that rose from the paved road in waves. An armed deputy looked inquiringly at Roger's bruises, but didn't press for explanations when Roger didn't give any. He led Roger to an office with batwing doors and presented him to the Chief of Police, Brad Schilling. Schilling was short and round with bristly blonde hair. His chin merged into his neck seamlessly, and his belly had long given up the fight. It strained against his uniform and looked like it would pop through the buttons if the chief took a deep breath. "Yeah?" His question was directed at the deputy. "Chief, he wanted to meet you, to lodge a complaint." Schilling looked Roger up and down and made a dismissive gesture with his hand, at which his deputy slunk out. "How can I help you? Where's the courtesy my state is famous for?" Roger sat in a chair, uninvited, his hands clasped loosely on the chief's wooden table. "I was attacked last night by 3 men. He narrated the events of the night without any interruption by Schilling. Neither did the police chief take any notes or start a recorder. Maybe he's got a photographic memory. "You're Feardon's son? I didn't know he had any kids." Schilling didn't sound apologetic, eager, or official. He looked dubious, as if he wanted nothing to do with Roger's case. "I was adopted. I ran away when I was 18. I never returned. I wanted nothing to do with them. You know they weren't popular? There were rumors that they used to mistreat the kids in their care, abuse them." Roger felt himself tighten inwardly, consciously relaxed. "Like I said, I had no more relations with them once I left." "You inherited the property, you said?" "Yes, Chief. Looks like they had no other offspring. You'll look into those who beat me up." "Looks like a big man like you got beaten easily," Schilling seemed to sneer. "Something tells me the Chief of Police of Crown Butte isn't taking my case seriously." Schilling's face darkened at the taunt in Roger's voice. 3 men in the dark and no description. What exactly am I supposed to investigate, Mr. Feardon? "You can question the miscreants in town. Look at their knuckles. You can do a lot, if you want to." "You telling me how to do my job?" Schilling flared. "Do you even know what it is?" Schilling rose, pushing back his chair so violently that it toppled. "Parish!" he yelled, his face red, his eyes small and mean. "Take Mr. Feardon's statement and look into it," he ordered peremptorily, straightened his chair and didn't look up from his desk. Roger recited his story for a second time and watched as the deputy took notes. Detailed notes. Maybe there's hope for this town. "You have to excuse the chief," Parrish murmured. "Chief Schilling has his hands full." "With what?" Roger demanded. "This is a small town. It surely can't be the crime capital of Texas." Parrish slid his eyes away and moistened his lips. It's those meth gangs. They've kept us occupied. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. Some of them nearly killed Chief Schilling. Shot at him several times. Only quick evasive action saved him. He looked knowingly at Roger. Happened just last week, at the Feardon place. Your place, Chapter 3. Yeah, Crown Butte has a meth and gang problem, Megan confirmed when Roger called her an hour later. He heard keys clicking as she read from online reports. A few thugs were captured last year. It looks like the town is either a manufacturing or distribution site, but that's only hearsay. No gang leader has been arrested. No one has confessed to anything. She went, as something caught her attention. You're Schilling. There's a report here that he was shot at. That bit is true, but doesn't sound as dramatic as the deputy made it out to be. Some youth drove past in a car and fired high, well above his head. Broke the windows in your home. No one arrested. Why are you asking? You have been there less than 24 hours and you've already lit some fires. Nope. Overheard stuff at a diner. Say, can you send me a package? A package contained more weapons, mags, NVGs, and other gadgets that they used on missions. Why do you need a package? Megan, alert, sensing that he wasn't telling everything. Roger managed a laugh. If some punks can take shots at the police chief, they can cut loose on me as well. You've got your Glock, spare mags. Why do you need anything else? It's not as if you're starting a war. She was persistent, relentless, which was why she was so valuable. Hold up. Her voice faded, and he could hear her talking to someone else. Buana, she came back. He says if there's a war brewing, he's coming. Hasn't killed any badasses in some time. He's getting rusty, he says. Just send it, Meg, Roger pleaded, and hung up before she could ask any more questions. If I tell her I was attacked, the whole lot of them will be here by sundown. All I want to do is put my property on the market and get away. Schilling can track those hoods or not. I don't care. Randy Grinder, the lawyer who had sent him the letter, had his office on the top floor of a bank on Main Street. The door to his office had frosted glass and sported his name. Roger swung it open and entered a small reception area. He gave his name to the woman behind the desk and idly read a leaflet while he waited. Randy Grinder, your friendly neighborhood lawyer. If I can't help you, no one can, ran the lawyer's strapline. Mr. Feardon? Roger tossed the leaflet away and shook the hands of a short, balding man with a beaming smile. Jacket, red tie, tan trousers, polished shoes, a face that said, "Trust me." That's me, Mr. Grinder. Randy? The lawyer made an aw-shucks gesture at Roger's formality. It took a while to locate you. He threw a searching glance at his visitor. Your folks didn't have any address for you. I went to the army, filled out truckloads of forms, but the address they gave wasn't helpful. A P.O. box. A few months of research before I got your New York address. I travel a lot, Roger replied, non-committally. About the property? Yeah. You got the house. Seen it yet? And also the farm. 10 acres. Your folks used to grow their vegetables and fruit. Sell them here, and if they had a good harvest, they shipped to larger cities. Dallas, San Antonio. When did they die? 5 years back. Grinder's brows came together. You didn't know? No, I didn't keep contact. Grinder nodded, understandingly. I heard. They came to me to make a will. They said whoever was next of kin should inherit the property. Didn't mention you by name. Said the estate would pay for finding you. How much is it? Grinder mentioned a figure and watched with round eyes when Roger brought out a check, wrote the amount, signed it, and slid it across the desk. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Feardon, he said appreciatively. What do you intend to do with the property? Sell it. What do you think it would go for? Grinder pursed his lips and mentioned a figure. You should consult a realtor, sir. I'm just guessing. I can recommend one to you. Matter of fact, he trailed off, frowning. Sally? He called out. The woman at the reception desk came to the door. Didn't we have an offer for the Feardon place just a couple of weeks back? Yes. Sally looked curiously at Roger and turned back to the lawyer. You laughed them out. It was too low. Yeah, ridiculously low. I thought they were joshing. Speak to a realtor, Mr. Feardon. They'll help you. Crown Butte realtors were too happy to help. The proprietor, Saul Henning, thrust a stack of forms at Roger. Just fill those out, and we'll do the rest. Roger took the forms to the diner to read as he lunched. They were all standard, and he was ready to ink them when he had his visitor. The man was dressed in a white suit, shades over his eyes, thick dark hair, styled smartly. Everything about him reeked of big city, no time for small towns. You're Roger Feardon? Uh-huh. You look like a busy man. I'll cut to the chase. I am Alberto Perez. Heard you inherited property. I'll buy it off you, right now. I'm a real estate man from Dallas. I build housing projects and office complexes. Your property's size is of interest to me. How much? He mentioned a figure which wasn't far off from the offer Grinder had received. That's low. Roger looked around for the server and made the universal sign for the check. Market's depressed. You won't get much more than that. In fact, I'm sure you won't get any other offer. That's so? Yeah. In that case, I won't sell. Perez's smile wavered for a fraction and returned, brighter. You got this property for free, Mr. Feardon. From what I hear, you have no ties to this town. Nothing. It'd be good business to take my offer. In cash. Nope. Roger rose, and Perez rose along with him and walked out along with him. Roger squinted in the bright sunlight, wore his shades, and made to leave when Perez thrust his business card at him. Keep that. You might need it. I won't. Roger kept it, nevertheless. He took a picture of it and sent it to Megan with a message. Check him out. An unhelpful police chief. An eager realtor. A suspicious offer. And the day's not even ended. Let me check out this property I've inherited. He stepped inside the house and was assailed by the distinct smell of stale air and urine. The house had a living room to the left of the entrance hallway and a staircase to the upper floor, just ahead. The living room merged into the dining room and kitchen. The entrance hallway went on to a bedroom and a bathroom. The upper floor had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. 2 of the bedrooms had broken windows, probably from those shots fired at Schilling. There were signs of recent use in one of the bedrooms, dirty laundry and linen, and an odor that he recognized immediately. Meth. Someone's been cooking meth here. He went to the smallest bedroom and stood at its doorway, unwilling to proceed further. Memories flashed in his mind. His foster father, taking a belt to him, locking him in the closet, bending over another foster child in the dark, the sound of crying. Roger turned away angrily, drew out his phone and snapped more pictures. He sent all of them to Megan and stomped out of the house. Whoever was cooking meth should have burned the house. They came at him in the night as he was returning from the diner. Chapter 4. Roger was near his vehicle when he heard the sound of running feet. He had meant to spend another night in his vehicle, in fact all his nights for as long as he was in Crown Butte. Sleeping in his inherited house had no attraction for him. He swung round, prepared this time, and saw 3 men, shapeless in the dark outfits, masks, bare-handed, as far as I can see. He didn't wait for polite talk or pleasantries. Neither did he draw his gun. He dropped to a knee and punched the first man in the gut. No retreating, no sidestepping, just a stiff arm with all his body weight behind the blow. The man's momentum did the rest. His breath wheezed out in a loud groan, and he collapsed when Roger slapped him heavily. I was wrong about no weapons. He ducked and rolled as a baseball bat swished above his head. He got to his feet swiftly and caught the bat on its reverse swing. He jabbed back, and the attacker was caught by surprise. He was ready for a sideways motion, not an inward thrust. He stumbled and went down when Roger kicked him in the groin. The third assailant wasn't hanging around to watch. He flung himself at Roger, smashing him back against the vehicle. Roger's head hit the door frame, and for a moment his vision blurred and his defenses eased. A knee caught him in the groin, and when he doubled over, an elbow found the small of his back. He fell, trying to regroup as fast as possible, twisted, and caught an incoming boot. He yanked it to the side and jabbed an uppercut. It caught the third man in the thigh, and he swayed to the side. Roger prepared to follow up when he was attacked from behind. A kick to his head knocked him forward and crashed his head against the vehicle. Another kick heaved him to the side. He rose in vicious fury, taking blows on his body and lashed out with a concrete-edged hand. One attacker fell down with a dislocated shoulder. Roger Rabbit punched a second man, and then from out of the dark, a fourth man appeared. He too was masked. He seemed to be carrying something, and before Roger could identify what it was too late. The baseball bat whistled through the air and connected with his temple. Just as he was blacking out, a voice chuckled, "That offer still stands. Not for long, though." A warm, wet cloth was dabbing at his face when he regained consciousness. It was still night. He was still in the driveway, lying next to his vehicle, his head feeling like 1,000 trip hammers were going simultaneously. A woman was bent over him, silvery-haired. She registered his eyes opening and smiled. "You're not dead, son. Neither am I an angel." He lay still, gathering his thoughts, trying to make sense. Rage flooded through him as the events came back to him. It momentarily drowned out the aches and pain in his body. He twisted his head. No baseball bat in sight. No other person but for the woman. She wiped his face softly and rose. "I think you'll be all right. You have a thick head. Your hair cushioned the blow. I think you were turning, and that reduced the impact." And with that, she disappeared. One moment, she was standing over him, and the next, she was gone. It was too much for Roger, and he lapsed back into darkness. He was in his vehicle when he woke up in the morning. He had no memory of climbing into it or of anyone helping him. Must have done it myself. He blinked blearily and looked around inside. Nothing seemed to be disturbed. His backpack was intact. His gun, phone, tablet computer, they were all there. He didn't bother to look in the mirror. He knew he looked bad. Thankfully, the hammers in his head had stopped, and when he felt his temple, so had the bleeding. That reminded him. There was a bloodied and crumpled paper towel in the seat next to him. He inspected it. Nope, it didn't match the towels he had in his vehicle. So she was there, whoever she was. He climbed out and washed his face, drove to a motel at the far end of town, where he rented a room using a false identity. He glared at the man behind the desk, stemming any curious questions. He showered and then felt halfway human. He dressed in a fresh pair of jeans and a tee. The Glock went in a shoulder holster, a jacket went on top, and he felt complete. He felt cold rage filling him, not the kind that made him see red, but an anger that made him lethal. He wasn't going to be run out of town. He wasn't going to be bullied into doing anything he didn't want to do. He was a Texan, and he would stand his ground, even if the entire town or his home state rose against him. Not just stand his ground, he would fight back. He would retaliate even if he lost his life in doing so. And if he died, He had friends. The kind who would dig a hole so deep in the ground and so wide. The kind of friends who would reach out to the moon, grab it, and bury it in the hole they had dug. His attackers had picked the wrong man to harass. They had commenced battle. Roger would wage war. War was best waged on a full belly. Roger thought about visiting another eating establishment, but then decided against it. It was at the diner that Perez had approached him. He would go there. Perez wasn't at the eatery when he seated himself. The same young woman who had served him the first time came to him. Her eyes widened when she saw his face. "How did that happen, sir? It looks nasty." The words slipped out of her involuntarily, and her face turned pink. "Baseball bat," he replied. My face took a shining to it. He didn't elaborate, smiling to make her feel at ease, and placed his order. "Were you around in the afternoon, yesterday?" he asked when she returned with his breakfast. "Yes, sir." He described Perez. "Does he come here often?" She nodded, her ponytail bouncing on her neck. "I remember him. That white suit was hard to forget. No, sir, I never saw him before." She hesitated for a moment. "He's responsible for that?" She looked at the bruises on his face. "I don't know," he admitted. "I was set upon by some masked men in the night. I never got to see their faces. Could you keep an eye out if that dude turns up again? I'll come back in the evening." He called Parrish as he washed down his breakfast with coffee. Hot, black, strong enough to raise the dead. The deputy was guarded when he replied, and Roger figured his boss was nearby. The deputy was waiting for him at the house when Roger returned. His mouth opened in shock, and he gaped for several moments before he got hold of himself. "Who?" "Last night," Roger pointed at the driveway. "Right here as I was returning from dinner. 4 of them attacked me. No." He stalled Parrish's questions. "I never saw their faces. They were masked. Don't know if 3 of them were the same attackers." He went through the previous day's events swiftly, glad that at least Parrish was taking him seriously. The deputy had his recorder out and was taking photographs of Roger's face, the driveway, the vehicle, and the house as Roger spoke. He broke off when Roger mentioned Perez in the offer. "And you say Sally didn't know him?" "Sally must be the server." "Nope." "She's got a good memory for faces. I'll ask around in any case." He shifted awkwardly and pocketed his phone. "We are understaffed. This is not a high priority for the chief." "You've been here a long time, Parrish?" "No, sir. Joined just 4 months back. Grew up in Dallas. Wife has family in the neighboring town. She didn't like the big city. We moved when this opening came up." "And Schilling?" "He's from the town. Local boy. He's been chief for several years. Knows everyone." "Well then, can you ask him who my attackers are?" Roger glowered and led Parrish inside the house. "Someone's been cooking meth here." He pointed to the marks on the walls and on the floors. "I can smell it." Parrish took more photographs and wrinkled his nose at the odor. "Doesn't look like a big operation. Feels like some tramps holed up for the night and cooked." "What I figured. Heard you have a meth problem. I don't think this is your factory. It must be someplace else." "Yeah. The arrests we made last year all admitted that there was a cook shop in the town, but no one knew where. It's driving the chief nuts. Product is flooding the county. Arrests are being made, but all are low-level hoods. Some jumped bail. Some are in prison. But they're all just the pushers. The real hoods are somewhere in the shadows." Small town. Under-resourced police department. Not much traffic. Therefore not much scrutiny. High unemployment. Youth have nothing much to do. Crown Butte's as close to ideal for a meth gang. He decided to hang on to the realtor's forms for a while and went in search of the farm he had inherited. It was 2 miles outside town, a dirt track leading to it from the Black Top. It had a fence once. A few poles still stood, drooping under the weight of time and gravity. Strands of barbed wire flashed in the light as they lay on the ground. Cut or broken, he couldn't tell. The farm had thick brush, patches of heavy undergrowth interspersed with barren ground. Nothing meaningful grew. He walked its length and breadth, but found no clue. Someone wants to buy this? Why? As far as he could see, the neighboring parcels of land were in no better shape. It's not as if this is the farming hub of Texas, or the mining capital. Why is anyone so desperate to buy it? There was no building on his farm. In a far corner was a copse of trees, and when he approached it, he saw her. Chapter 6. Roger followed Schilling the next day. The idea, when it came to him as he lay half awake as the new day was dawning, was so simple and so obvious that he wondered why he hadn't thought of it before. Better late than never. He showered, shaved, and went to the package that Megan had sent him. He cast his eye over the assortment of weapons and reached into a pocket in the soft bag. He came up with wigs of different kinds and hair accessories. No wig, but definitely a mustache. He picked up a particular limp and droopy one that gave its wearer a sad, weary look. He attached a beard, a straggly one, a weak man's attempt to look manly and strong. He brought out a bottle of putty and shaped his nose, made it fleshier, thickened his face by wearing cheek pads. He stood in front of the mirror and slouched, a man who wasn't beaten by life yet, but life was clearly winning. He went to the package and rifled through several fake identities. Cletus Murphy, not an unusual name. He checked the photograph on Murphy's driving license. It was an okay match. A sharp look would raise questions, but Roger wasn't expecting sharp looks, not in Crown Butte. He went to another diner, filled himself up with bacon and coffee, and made inquiries. Yeah, he was told. There was a used car outfit several blocks away. Nope, one could walk, the server replied. But in this heat? Roger walked. By the time he reached the dealer, his shirt was sticking to his body and perspiration flowed down his face. It was good. It would add to his persona. A salesman brightened when he approached. His smile started to fall when Roger came closer. This wasn't a customer who was going to spend much, if at all. No big fat commission here. Still, a deal was a deal. He straightened his shoulders, turned up the wattage. He stuck his hand out and greeted Roger as if he was his closest friend. Sure, Mr. Murphy, we've got several cars that you would like. Reliable, budget-friendly. This way, sir. He steered Roger to the back, away from the showpiece vehicles at the front. At the rear were the sad specimens, cars that had seen a lot of blacktop and asphalt. Roger tried a Ford and a Dodge. He went to the Japanese cars. They all turned well. They were polished and smelled nice, but their age was apparent. He went back to the Ford, a Mustang, black, sleek lines, and even though it was old, it was still a standout ride. He circled it, admiring the vehicle, undecided. Roger would buy the vehicle, but Cletus wouldn't. He lifted the hood and watched the engine run. Not that there was much to see, since the protective cover hid most of the motor, but Cletus Murphy had to give the appearance of thoroughly checking out his car. He kicked the tires, literally. He didn't know if anyone did that anymore, but Cletus Murphy did. He gave in. The Mustang cast its spell over him. Not the most anonymous vehicle, but Cletus Murphy would buy it. It would make him look less of a loser, he told himself. He haggled with the salesman. Cletus would absolutely do that. Got the salesman to lower the price by a full $500 by using that whiny voice that drove Megan nuts. Half an hour later, he was the proud owner of a 10-year-old Mustang, paid for in cash, which broadened the salesman's smile. Commissions on cash were better. Roger swung back to Main Street and made several passes down the drag, letting people see him, keeping an eye out for Schilling. No police chief visible yet. It wasn't even 11. He went to the police station and parked behind a large SUV. Yeah, he could watch the front of the building. And its parking lot. Schilling's cruiser was there, a sticker at the back proudly proclaiming it as the chief of police's ride. The chief didn't emerge. Parrish bobbed out, drove in a cloud of dust and a roar of engines. Other deputies drifted in and out. Citizens came in, presumably to meet Schilling. Few of them were smiling when they exited. Lunch was a hot dog, lots of chili, wrapped up in an old newspaper. Roger read as he chewed. He downed it with water and burped satisfyingly. No Jenny around to give him the look. No twins to roll their eyes or Chloe to sigh. Besides, Cletus Murphy would burp, Roger argued with himself. It was in character. Schilling stomped out at 4 p.m. Hands on hips, he glared to the left, then to the right. When there was no recipient for his glare, he drew out a pair of shades and went to his cruiser. He U-turned impressively, turned on his light bar and siren and raced out. He turned left at Main Street. Left was the direction to Roger's house and Sharon Landers's. The police chief didn't wait for lights to turn green. What was the siren for? He went down Main Street in regal splendor, his face straight ahead, his hat jammed over his head, the picture of a man enforcing the law. He drove past the street to Roger's house without slowing or stopping. At the end of the drag, when the retail establishment started to fall away, he hung a right, past office blocks and boarded-up stores. Once out of sight of Main Street, the siren fell silent, as did the light bar. His speed slowed. He circled through back streets and alleys, and Roger hung far behind, allowing a couple of cars to cut in ahead. Schilling surprised him when he turned into his own driveway. A white boarded house, neat-looking front yard, a flag. The police chief didn't head inside. He switched vehicles and drove out in his own car, a Subaru. Roger followed him through more twists and turns until the chief disappeared inside an industrial complex. Packaging companies, warehouses. Not very busy that time of the afternoon. It was 5 p.m. and work was winding down. It wasn't like big cities. Roger followed inside on the heels of a semi and pulled up under its cover, just in time to see Schilling climb inside a brown car. Too far to make out its model, but it looked like a Nissan. Schilling drove out without a word to anyone. Not that there were many people in the yard. Those present didn't give a second glance to the Nissan and the Ford. Schilling drove out of town. The houses got fewer, more office and industrial blocks. They too disappeared. The lone farmhouse passed. Roger hung well back on blacktop, and when Schilling turned on a dirt track, he contemplated following. A slow-moving farm vehicle, a harvester, made his mind up for him. It trundled into the dirt track, and he used it for cover. He tried to peer around it, but couldn't see past it. The track ran for miles, branched off to lead to farmhouses. An hour passed before Roger backed up into an animal path and reversed. He's gone to one of the farmhouses. Which one? He had passed branch roads to 4 of them. He turned into the first one, staying low, his shades over his face, keeping an eye out for traffic from the other side, going slow to avoid raising dust. The farmhouse came into the distance. He crawled and removed a pair of binos. No Nissan, other vehicles, but not Schilling's in its drive. He struck gold at the 3rd farmhouse. The Nissan's nose was pointing at the gate. No people visible. Roger parked on the dirt road, reversed and jammed the vehicle tight against brush. He set off on foot, his Glock heavy on his shoulders, binos around his neck, and surveillance devices in his pocket. There was one man, smoking as he leaned against the side of the building. There wasn't much cover. The land was sparse, and a few stunted trees, not much else. The man wasn't alert, however. Light gleamed off something across his body. Something long, and metallic, an AR-14. Roger fell to his belly and crawled away from him and went behind the house. No guards at the back. He went to the nearest window and extracted a tube and plugged one end of it to his phone. The other end had a camera and a recorder. That room was the kitchen, empty. He turned to other windows, bedrooms, storerooms. And then he got lucky. In a large room to one side, away from the lone guard side, he spotted Schilling. The chief was facing the window, speaking to two men whose backs were to Roger. Beer cans on the table between them. Relaxed, friendly, perhaps a citizen, a friend. Roger jammed an earpiece and listened to talk of weather, laughter. One of the men rose and stretched, but he didn't turn. And then Schilling spoke of danger. Roger tensed and listened keenly, his eyes on his screen. We should lie low for a while. Let this guy leave. You scared of a stranger? The stretching man laughed. Me. They're talking about me. I looked him up, Schilling persisted. He's from New York, works in a security firm, ex-army. Let him sell his house and leave. The second man slapped a palm on the table. It sounded like a shot. Schilling started. You know what his selling means? He growled. A voice that was familiar. Perez? It means we've lost control. And we were planning to move to another location in any case, Schilling whined. Turn. Turn. Let me see you. The standing man obliged. He whirled to the window, coming to it quickly. Roger ducked low, hugging the ground, his Glock coming out instinctively. He lay on his back, eyes focused on his barrel. Barrel to window, expecting a shout of discovery. Shots. A stream of spittle flew out of the window. Some drops landed on him. No, we got to finish cooking, stall him, hassle him, buy a few days. Spitting man was unrelenting. Gotcha! Roger fist-pumped. His camera had captured the man. It had captured Perez as he too had turned to face the window. Roger kept crouching, listening, as they talked of loads, of keeping him, Roger, in the town. Crunching footsteps from around a corner. Roger fled in the other direction, didn't wait, didn't hang around. He went into the farm, putting as much distance between him and house, turning to see if anyone was following. No one was. He wiped sweat off his face and circled back to his ride. In its sanctuary, he checked his phone. The recording was good. The faces were clear. In particular, the conversation was there on his phone. He drove back cautiously, and as he was approaching Main Street, they boxed him. Chapter 7. The two cruisers were parked nose to nose, blocking the crossway 3 parallel streets away from the main drag. Houses on either side, single-lane road, darkness falling. Roger's lights picked out Schilling, one hand on his hip, close to his gun, a satisfied look on his face. The police chief had his butt against the cruiser's door as he watched Roger approach. Parrish was next to him, nervous. 2 more deputies on either side of the cruisers, shotguns out, not yet pointing at Roger. How did he get ahead of me? Must be some other route to the town. Roger was still in his disguise, his cap and shades still covering most of his face. The Mustang ran well, hugging the road, low on its wheels. He was still a distance away, but closing fast. No side road to escape. If they stop me, my disguise won't last long. He was sure Schilling didn't know who he was beneath his appearance. There was nothing to connect Cletus Murphy to Roger Feardon. Small town. Betcha those cops haven't fired their weapons in ages. Their cruisers will be old. He floored it, and the Mustang responded. It surged forward, the growl growing louder, echoing in the street. Wind rushed through a crack between a window and its frame, nearly unseated his cap. He jammed it back tighter and suppressed the grin that had appeared. Cletus Murphy would be nervous, scared. Schilling's air of confidence evaporated when the Mustang showed no signs of slowing. He yelled something at Parrish. at the deputies who turned their shotguns to the racing vehicle. Roger slumped into his seat, just his eyes showing above the dash. The first rounds flew wide, well above his car. Houses blurred past. Schilling dived away to safety. So did Parrish. And then the Mustang was plowing into the cruisers. Roger had pointed the vehicle well. The ends of its hood smashed into the front wheel wells of the cruisers. 220 brake horsepower against angled stationary vehicles. No contest. The cruisers scattered, the shotgun-wielding deputies ducking for cover. Windows burst. The Mustang's hood crumpled and metal shrieked. It protested, and the revs went into the red at the impact. But it didn't stop. Thousands of man-years of engineering had gone into designing it. One of the finest American muscle cars. It went through the police cars, brushing them away scornfully. Roger's body rocked violently in the crash. The seatbelt cut deeply into him, but he was in one piece. The windshield had splintered and starbursts had appeared. It stayed in place, however, and he peered around the cracks to put distance between him and the cruisers. In the mirror, he saw the cruisers rocking on their wheels, smoke arising from their tires and from under their hoods. And then they disappeared from sight as he turned a corner. He raced back to the dealership, which was now closed. There were floodlights high up on lampposts that kept the night at bay. He parked at its gated entrance and turned the engine off. In the following silence, he heard sirens in the distance. It'll take a long while for them to work out where I went. He had taken evasive measures before coming to the dealership. No one had spotted him. He wiped the vehicle clean, removed a can of gasoline from the rear, and set the inside alight. That would take care of any DNA trace. He threw his disguise and clothes in the blaze, made sure that the fire reduced everything to ash, changed into a spare set of clothes from his backpack, and jogged back to his house. There were forensic techniques that could analyze ash. He didn't think Crown Butte would have access to such techniques. Even if it did, even if the state troopers were called in, there would be nothing that could be traced back to him. His house was still and dark. His SUV was in the drive, undisturbed. No sign of Schilling or any other cop. No cruisers in sight, though the sirens had grown louder. He leaned against his vehicle and watched the streets for a while. A few residents came out of their houses and looked in the direction of the sirens. He could imagine the rumor mills going into overdrive. Police chief's vehicle smashed. Schilling lucky to be alive. He couldn't help chuckling. He extracted his phone and sent the recording to Megan, with a request for another package. She squawked in surprise in her return message. "You need that. Why?" "Send it, please. To reach me tomorrow." He turned off his phone, climbed into his ride, drove to Sharon Lander's house, and joined her for dinner. He could face down an army with a home-cooked meal in his belly. He probably would have to the next day. Roger lounged around in his vehicle the next day. He changed its tires, no reason to do so, but it kept him occupied. He topped up the oil, tightened a few nuts and bolts, all the while keeping an eye out for Schilling or any cruiser. One cruiser came by his street, the cops in it looking disinterestedly at him. Their vehicle was in good condition. No dents, windows intact. And I guess there aren't that many cruisers left in Crown Butte PD. He felt a wicked urge rise in him, and he battled it off for as long as he could. He gave in finally and drove to the police department. He bit back a smile when he spotted Schilling's Subaru in the parking lot. Parrish was nowhere to be seen in the small building, but he could hear the police chief yelling at someone. Everyone could hear it. The civilians in the department had their eyes glued to their workstations or to the files in front of them. Maybe raising their heads would attract Schilling's wrath like a lightning conductor. Roger shrugged. He stood for a while trying to get someone's attention, and when no one did, he went to the police chief's office. He knocked. "I'm busy. Can't you hear me?" Schilling roared from inside. Roger pushed in, nevertheless. Schilling looked bug-eyed at him. That didn't stop Roger, who eased himself in a chair, crossed his legs, relaxed, as if he and the police chief were golfing buddies. "Hold up!" Schilling snapped at whoever was at the other end of the line, his phone cradled between neck and shoulder. "I'm busy," he hissed at Roger. "Take your time, Chief. I'll wait," Roger drawled. Schilling gave him the stink eye. It didn't work on his visitor. "I'll call you back," Schilling told his caller stiffly. "I'll call you back. Didn't you hear me?" "Mr. Feardon, we're busy." "I hope you're busy finding my attackers," Roger broke in. Schilling made a manful job of reining in his temper. "Mr. Feardon, a hoodlum ran through 2 of our cruisers yesterday, nearly killed us. We are hunting him down." "Nope, I was nowhere close to killing you." "You say? Rammed into you for no reason? Why, Chief?" "If I knew, you think I would be sitting here?" Schilling barked. "Parish is on your case. We'll come to you if we find anyone, but you have to know we're a small department. Right now we have our hands full in finding who nearly killed you, while those who nearly killed me get away. I get it, Chief." "You!" Schilling's stubby finger shot out and quivered in rage. "You don't take that tone with me, mister. Every crime in this town is important to me." Roger left soon after, feeling pleased with himself. He had needled Schilling. The police chief had no clue who the dude in the Mustang was. On the other hand, he had proof that Schilling had met a suspected drug runner. Megan had sent a message when he had been with the police chief. "Paolo Ramirez," she said, "meth dealer in Dallas and a few other cities in Texas, known to be one of the largest dealers in the state. His gang was simply known as the Rez and ran to 50 strong. He manufactured product in the state and sold it to various smaller gangs and pushers. He had been arrested once, had served time for 6 years. During prison, he had taken a shiv to another prisoner, had cut him up in the shower stalls. Nothing had been proven, however. No witnesses had come forward and no cameras had spotted anything. Ramirez had walked free and since then had invested in property throughout the state. Cops in several cities had questioned him but hadn't found any dirt on him. They knew he ran the Rez. But knowing wasn't enough. Prosecutors liked pesky things called evidence. "Who's Perez?" he messaged. "No clue. Must be an associate. Must be close to Ramirez." "Yes, did you collect the package?" "Going now." "Be careful. Ramirez is dangerous. Buana wants to come." "No." Yeah, in all it had been a good day, and when he collected the large box from a courier company's warehouse, he felt immensely better. The box contained GPR, ground-penetrating radar equipment. The machine blasted high-frequency radio waves at the ground and analyzed the reflected waves. The variations in the received signal told a lot about what was beneath the surface. Archaeologists used GPR to detect subsurface remains. The military used it to find tunnels, like the ones Mexican cartels used. The machine was easy to use, and it not only recorded readings on an inbuilt computer, it could also transmit the findings to Werner, wirelessly. Roger went in for the second option as he ran the machine on the ground floor of his house. It took an hour to scan all the rooms, and 2 hours later, Megan came back. "Nothing. Your mansion isn't a cookshop, not even a hidden basement in your house." Roger wasn't disappointed. That was pretty much what he had been expecting. He was hoping, however, that the machine's next run would be more fruitful. Chapter 8. Dinner was in Sharon Lander's cozy home. Apple pie, lamb in some chili sauce that went down his throat and sent a warm glow through him. "Ma'am, best you don't come out tonight, even if you hear anything." She looked at him sharply, made a move to question him, but something in his eyes stopped her. Sure, she nodded. Not that I wake up a lot these days. He rested when he returned to his vehicle, taking light naps, preparing his body for whatever the night might throw. The night threw a bright moon that painted everything in its white light. That isn't so good, he thought, when he looked out at 1 a.m. The moon didn't care. It had its orbit that it hurtled around, had been doing so for thousands of years. Some insignificant human wasn't going to change it. Roger set out at 2 a.m., lights dimmed on his vehicle. He parked in the copse and went to the edge of the farm. The machine had wheels and a silent motor. He ran a first pass, parallel to the dirt track. The machine ran well, its wheels easily riding over the uneven ground. He got down to serious business. At 3 a.m. he fist-pumped. The GPR indicated the presence of an underground room, a rectangular one, 20 by 30 feet, near the other end of the farm, about 20 feet below ground. That's the cook shop, Roger thought in elation. He ran the machine again, several passes. Each reading confirmed the room's presence. Werner backed him up, and that was good enough for Roger. He didn't know if there were any humans underground. He suspected there would be. Ramirez probably had several Mexican workers or people who were captive down below. Cooking and packing, they will need fresh air. There has to be a ventilation system. He didn't find any vents. Maybe they are disguised to fit into the land's topography. He went back to his vehicle and stowed away the machine. He sent several emails and then settled back in his seat thinking, "Nah, it would have taken a lot of men and money to dig that underground. Ramirez probably got in touch with my foster parents, got the work started with their consent. He paid them, highly likely. The lights that Sharon saw. That must be deliveries. Or meth being shipped out. A good operation till I came along and upset their apple cart. Decided to sell the house and the farm. The house wasn't important to them. The farm was." He rubbed his jaw, feeling his stubble rasp against his palm. Why didn't anyone else spot those lights? No one else comes here. This is as good as abandoned land. Besides, the town is small, not many folks in it. Now what? Going to Schilling is pointless. He is complicit, and it would only alert him. What about the sheriff? Rio Grande City was the county seat of Starr County, in whose jurisdiction Crown Butte fell. It was a border county, one of the poorest counties in the state. It was 30 miles away from Crown Butte, parallel to the border, abandoned downtown, little employment. Roger recalled the details Megan had sent him of Rio Grande City as he strode to the sheriff's office the next day. It was a pale building, a block of concrete that somehow seemed fitting for a law enforcement agency's office. Sheriff Eddie Kimbrell looked the opposite of Schilling. He was tall, broad shoulders, hawk-like eyes that seemed to see through people. He had a barely perceptible gut. He had a commanding presence and a raspy voice. He looked how a sheriff on Hollywood would portray a border town sheriff. "Mr. Feardon?" Kimbrell gestured to a seat after shaking his hand with a firm grip. More polite than Schilling, for sure. "Your assistant, Megan Peterson, sent me an email, something about a strange story, a meth shop underground. Not so strange, Sheriff, if you study what she sent." My assistant. Megan will never forgive me for that. No, one of the emails he had sent out in the night was to her, requesting her to make an appointment with the sheriff. Let's see. Kimbrell reached under a sheaf of papers and withdrew a printout. It was the analysis from the GPR machine, a pictorial view of what lay underneath. Megan had highlighted the rectangular shape and scrawled cook shop on it in case anyone was in doubt. "She's very enthusiastic," Roger commented when Kimbrell's lips twitched. "Just who are you, sir?" Kimbrell asked him, peering closely at the printout. Roger told him without referring to the agency. "You'll come good if I check you out?" "Yes, Sheriff." "What made you get this machine?" Roger spent half an hour detailing all the events since his receiving the letter. "And you think Police Chief Schilling is involved?" I know for certain, Sheriff. He drew out his cell and played the recording for the sheriff, who closed his eyes and swore silently when it had finished. Kimbrell's face became grim as he studied the printout in silence. I don't like dirty cops, sir. Not one bit. They stink. They bring ill repute to my department. I have heard of Ramirez. Every cop has heard of him. I never thought a cop in my county would be consorting with him. Consorting. Old-fashioned word. Roger felt hopeful. It looked like Kimbrell was treating the matter seriously. Megan had sent him the sheriff's profile, and he had studied it before setting off to the county seat. There wasn't any blemish in Kimbrell's record. Glowing references, well liked in the county. You'll have to leave this with me, sir. I'll take it from here. We don't have much time, Sheriff. You heard what Ramirez said. They want to move the product soon. I know. I'll keep you in the loop. I can't promise you more. That's good enough for me, Sheriff. You plan on staying for a while, Mr. Feardon? In Crown Butte? Yes, Sheriff. Till this goes down. One thing I can promise you, Mr. Feardon. I will end this. 2 days passed, during which Roger pestered the Crown Butte Police Department during the day and kept watch over the farm at night. There wasn't any activity in the farm at night. No suspicious figures moved, no lights burned or vehicles appeared. The police department didn't have any progress to report to him. Parrish was apologetic whenever Roger met him, while Schilling refused to meet him. I'm busy, he stonewalled repeatedly, whenever Roger accosted him in the corridors of the department. Kimbrell called him on the third day. Mr. Feardon? Yeah, Sheriff. I have an update for you. We are going in tomorrow. At night. You got the state troopers coming in? You'll see for yourself, sir. Would you like to be in the Go team? Roger stared at his phone. It was unusual for any civilian to be part of a Go team. As far as the cops and the sheriff were concerned, he was very much a civilian. Kimbrell seemed to sense his thoughts. You have military experience, Mr. Feardon. I pulled up your records, spoke to some people. You might have more experience than our troopers or the SWAT team. I'll be there. Great. Kimbrell's voice lightened. I'll message you with details. We will end this. Together. Chapter 9. Roger didn't know what to expect of the Go team, nor did he know what they would find in the cook shop. His solution was to go overboard in preparations. He stuffed his combat fatigues with grenades and flashbangs. He replaced his shades with NVGs. They looked just like sunglasses, but couldn't be used in the day. He carried extra mags, cleaned his Glock, thought about taking his assault rifle but backtracked. I am a guest, not an active participant. He visited the now familiar diner on the day of the Go. Sally served him and shook her head when he asked about Perez. No, sir. He never showed up. I checked with the other staff. They haven't seen him since the day you met him. At noon, Kimbrell sent a message. 10 p.m. Roger commenced watch at 7 p.m. He lay down in a thicket of grass next to the cops. Beanos to his eyes, earpiece to connect him to Megan. The farm was still. The town was quiet. Sharon Landers' home was invisible from where he lay. She didn't know he was out there. At 9 p.m., he heard a rumbling in the distance. He heard the sound grow louder, and from the approach street, a yellow vehicle emerged. It lumbered slowly and came to a stop at the side of the farm. Roger grinned silently when he recognized the vehicle. Now he knew Kimbrell's plan. The vehicle was a digger, a giant earth mover, the kind used in construction. The sheriff and the cops arrived in a flurry of vehicles. Several officers jumped out of their rides and mounted large floodlights on the sides and corners of the farm. They turned them on, and night disappeared. Kimbrell was talking to a uniformed officer when Roger approached him. You seem prepared, Mr. Feardon, the sheriff smiled as he sized Roger up. You are here as an interested party, sir. No active role for you. I understand, Sheriff. Roger looked at the police officer, but Kimbrell didn't make any introductions. Must be a SWAT officer. They remain anonymous sometimes, to prevent any blowback to families. Schilling arrived and stiffened at Roger's sight. He didn't say a word, however, and marched up to Kimbrell, and the two had a quiet conversation. Roger stood to one side and let the cops get on with their preparation. 6 men, outfitted in the same gear as the unnamed SWAT officer, pulled masks over their faces. The officer did the same. They ranged behind Kimbrell and Schilling as they trotted across the farm, to the end, where the cook shop was buried. The digger trundled across the farm, its large wheels and chains making easy work of the uneven surface. At 10 p.m., everyone was in place. Kimbrell dropped his hand in a chopping motion, and the digger began. Its jaws plunged into the ground and dug out great chunks of soil. The ground shook whenever it attacked the ground, and the sounds its engine made could have woken the entire town. Schilling's got the streets cordoned off. Townspeople have been advised to stay inside, Kimbrell yelled when he noticed Roger looking towards the town. Good thinking. Roger gave him a thumbs up just as the digger went at the farm again. Half an hour went by, the hole in the ground growing larger, 7 feet deep. The SWAT team was to its side. Cops, led by Schilling, on the same side as Roger. Only the digger facing the hole. Good tactics again. There could be hostile fire once the cook shop is exposed. Only the digger is exposed, and it is well protected. The hole got to 10 feet, and the ground suddenly moved. The digger took evasive action. Its jaws rose, and it retreated. The SWAT team readied, their weapons aimed at the farm. Roger watched open-mouthed as a section of the farm rose, much like the opening of a garage door. It was smooth, powered by invisible hydraulics. The section was large, 15 feet wide, 20 feet long. As the mouth opened, they could see the door was a giant metal frame. On top of it was the farm's layer of soil and undergrowth. Several inches of it. Below it was dark metal, levers working as the door swung on invisible hinges. The door stayed still when it reached its zenith. Nothing moved from inside the cook shop. No sound emerged. "You are surrounded. Come out with your hands raised," Kimbrell ordered over a bullhorn. "We are unarmed," a thin voice came out weakly. "We can't move. You can come in." "Trap?" Roger sensed everyone's thoughts. The SWAT officer conferred briefly with his men and with Kimbrell, who repeated his order. The same reply came back. "They don't have those bomb disposal robots. It could go inside and inspect." Kimbrell made another gesture, and 2 SWAT officers went to the mouth. They took cautious steps, their rifles to their shoulders, remaining officers covering them. They disappeared from sight. No shots sounded, no hostile voices. "Sheriff, you got to see this," an officer called out. "It's safe. You all can come down." The SWAT team led the way, Kimbrell and Schilling following. Roger went last. None of the town's cops followed. The inside of the cook shop was brightly lit. White industrial lights hanging from cables, fans turning in the walls, rows of tables with burners and flasks, cans and boxes, plastic baggies piled high on one table, and 7 Mexican workers, chained to walls. Roger took it all in swiftly before a sound distracted him. He turned around to see the mouth shut. They were sealed inside the cook shop. 7 SWAT officers, Kimbrell, Schilling, Roger, and the Mexicans. In the meth factory beneath the farm that Roger had inherited. Why have they closed the exit? Is it a trap? Roger looked around but couldn't see any threat. There was one door in a wall. Bathroom from the sign outside. The odor of chemicals lay heavy in the air. Sweat and fear. "Where's Ramirez?" Kimbrel asked the bound men sternly. He was a step ahead of the rest of them, Schilling behind him. The SWAT men fanned out at the rear, Roger backing up. To Roger's left was a long table with the finished product, 10 feet away. Plastic and white powder gleamed under the light. To his left was a wall with shelves, chemical jars, cardboard cartons, the bathroom door. Ahead were the chained men, shivering, fright visible in their eyes. One of them squinted and leaned forward. Looked at Kimbrel. No, not at him, behind his shoulder. Roger moved to get a better look when the Mexican's eyes bulged in surprise. "You—" Kimbrel shot the Mexican, just like that. No warning, no indication, no hesitation. Roger gawped for a fraction of a second before the sheriff turned around and glared at Schilling. "You got sloppy." He triggered once again and Schilling went down. Kimbrel's cold eyes roved over the SWAT men, seeking out Roger. "You should have left the town when you had the chance, friend. You stirred a hornet's nest, and they sting." His words came from far away as Roger tried to comprehend, tried to stay on top of the fast-moving developments. Kimbrel shot Schilling, so Kimbrel was part of it too. "You hearing me?" Makes sense. Schilling protected the cook shop. Kimbrel allowed Ramirez free rein in the county. They were in it together. The SWAT too. Not SWAT, just officers, crooked cops. And then his predicament set in. "They will finish me." He turned back to Kimbrel, who was glowering at him, the cops splitting up, moving to either side of him. "Ramirez's men roughed you up. You should have taken the hint then." "I'm sort of stubborn that way," Roger drawled, his easy tone masking his heightened alertness. There was no cover, just that table to his left. Seemed to be metal. "And you'll take that to your grave. We bust a cook shop. Schilling, and you lost your lives in the firefight. Those will be the official reports." He raised his gun. Roger dove out of his line of fire. His Glock came up smoothly. He fired, and kept firing, and then he was landing behind the table, upturning it, the roar of guns filling the air, echoing in the closed space, the table thick enough, strong enough to stop the hail of bullets. Thank the Lord for that table, thank its manufacturer. His free hand went to his pockets and reluctantly fell away. "Can't use grenades. Cook shop will explode. Those Mexicans don't have to die like this. A fast mag change. Keep firing over the top of the table, just his gun showing, weaving in arcs. Bullets thudding into the table, powder exploding in the air. No hostiles coming around the table. Not yet. Can't last long. They will wait till I run dry of ammo. There's no need for them to take risks. I need a distraction." "I was recording everything, transmitting it back to my office," he yelled out to Kimbrel. "You're going down, even if you get me." "There's no signal here," Kimbrel, hoarse. Did I get him? He risked a quick glance, ducked swiftly when bullets crashed into the table, but time enough for the images to register. Kimbrel down, not dead, 2 cops down, 5 others spread out, in front of the table, jammed against the far wall, far enough for them to duck whenever he fired. Roger fired at the lights. Some of them went out. He fired a longer burst behind him, and the cook shop went dark. "Get him!" Kimbrel shouted. "He's just one man!" And a concentrated burst of firing came his way. The sound drowned out his dragging the table away towards the Mexicans. Not close enough to draw them in the line of fire. He didn't know if the hostiles saw the table had moved. It was too dark to see anything. The different angle got him closer to Kimbrel, and he kept firing in the sheriff's direction. Last mag change. Not much time left for Roger Feardon on this earth. He smiled grimly, got his hand above the table and resumed, mentally placing where the returning fire came from, aiming in the dark. Just him and the hostiles. Time running out for him. A groan from someone, hoping it would be Kimbrel. The mouth opened suddenly. Bright light flooded in. FBI! Put your weapons down! A female voice commanded. A voice he knew well. The firing intensified. Less of it came his way. Firing from the mouth. They're taking on the FBI. He would have snorted if he hadn't been under attack. If the danger wasn't still real and present. He saved his ammo, firing single shots, giving cover for the FBI. The cops and Kimbrel were trapped, between FBI at the mouth and Roger at the side. "Stop! We are surrendering!" Kimbrel, gasping. The shooting trickled to a slow. None came in his direction. Then it stopped. "Throw your weapons down. Anyone moves, he will die." Roger sneaked another glance. Kimbrel on the floor. 3 cops left, cowering behind the bodies of their fallen friends. "I can move, can't I? I am the good guy?" Roger asked. Adrenaline and the fact that he was somehow alive, making him feeling lightheaded. A figure came inside the cook shop, long hair tucked under a FBI cap, bright eyes, FBI agents behind her. Approaching cautiously, disarming and cuffing those who were alive. Securing the fallen weapons. The lead figure came over to his table. "Mr. Feardon, are you okay?" Concern in the eyes, inspecting him anxiously, voice professional as he knew it would be. "I'm fine. Special Agent Burke." Special Agent in charge. Sarah Burke, Broker's girlfriend, friend to the agency, relaxed imperceptibly. It was always Mr. Feardon, Mr. This, Miss That, when they were in public. "It's a miracle," she said. "Not really, ma'am. I'm a Texan. We're sorta indestructible." Chapter 10. Pounding feet at the door. Guns swiveled and covered the large black man who appeared at the entrance. He was armed to the teeth. HKMP-5 in his hands, Glock in a thigh holster, a combat knife on the other leg, NVGs across his neck, armored vest. He wasn't panting, even though he seemed to have run a distance. His eyes were peering over the FBI agents, searching. "Ma'am, he says he's a friend of Mr. Feardon," an agent called out. Burke cursed so softly that only Roger could hear her. "Are all of them coming?" Them, his friends. "Don't think so, ma'am," Roger replied, equally softly. "They probably figure Bwana and I can take out a city the size of Dallas. All by ourselves." "Let him through." Bwana strode inside, quickly hiding the worry on his face when he saw Roger had no apparent injuries. "I asked you to stay away," Roger grumped at him. "And since when did I ever listen to you?" Bwana frowned. He turned to Burke. "Ma'am, can I shoot someone? I came all this way, my trigger finger's itchy. One crooked cop? Just one?" Burke rolled her eyes and left them, a sound behind them. They whirled to see Kimbrel diving for a gun, which still lay on the floor. The sheriff's body was bloody. His face was desperate as he clawed at the gun, got his cuffed hands around it, rested on a shoulder, and took aim at Roger. "Watch out!" an agent yelled. Bwana's draw was quicker than a cobra's strike. His Glock bucked once, twice, and Kimbrel fell back, never to trouble anyone again. "Always wanted to tame a Texas town," Bwana smiled happily and sheathed his gun. It turned out that Perez was an FBI plant. The agent had infiltrated Ramirez's gang a while back and had been collecting evidence on the gang's activities. The FBI had been on the verge of busting the gang when they had discovered Schilling and Kimbrel's involvement. Roger's arrival had concerned Burke, who was camped out in Rio Grande City. She had no means of alerting Roger or Zeb or anyone else at the agency without putting Perez at risk. She had the undercover agent approach Roger in the diner, but Roger had cut the meeting short. "I figured you wouldn't bother coming to Crown Butte. You wouldn't want anything to do with your property." She handed out paper cups of steaming coffee outside the farm as the FBI agents carted away the crooked cops. The Mexican workers would be interrogated and would most likely be deported. We knew of the cook shop beneath the farm. She sipped and grimaced at the strong brew. Didn't figure you would discover it too. Roger's foster parents were closely tied to Ramirez's gang, she explained. There was a chain of payments in his adopted father's account that could be traced back to the drug runner. If they hadn't died, they would have been arrested. Were they pedophiles? He asked her when the other agents had drifted away. She didn't reply, didn't meet his eyes. That was answer enough. Buana clapped him on his shoulder. They weren't family, buddy. I am. We are. And Roger took a deep breath of night air, looked up at the benign moon, and knew Buana was right. Burke stopped them as they were leaving, a look of devilry in her eyes. She thrust a photograph at Roger, a droopy mustache, sad beard. It was that of Cletus Murphy as he was driving out of the dealership in the Mustang. Is that you? Roger barely glanced at the photograph before Buana snatched it from his fingers. Who is he, Mom? Roger played innocent. Went by the name of Cletus Murphy. He bought that car in the local dealership, smashed it into a couple of police cruisers. The cops are looking for him. No sign of him, ma'am. Nope. The car was found, burnt, a wreck outside the dealership, but Murphy has disappeared. You know anything of him? No, ma'am. Looks like a loser. Not how I look. That's what I thought. She took the picture back. There's a warrant out for him. Looks like he's carrying the world on his shoulders in that photograph. You'd think he would have enough trouble without a warrant. I guess I could make it disappear. I'm sure he'd appreciate it, ma'am. Tell him he owes me. A year later. They were in the New York office. Another mission behind them. Fewer terrorists in the world. Roger stretched and felt the tickets in his pocket. Broadway show tickets for Jenny and him that evening. Life with her and his friends was not good. It was great. Megan came across his desk and rudely shoved his feet off the table. She slapped an envelope on the surface and waited for him to peel it open. Roger straightened when he saw the postmark. Crown Butte. His heart thumped. He had sold both the house and the farm a while ago. The proceeds had gone towards Sharon Landis's medical care. She didn't know of it. He made it very clear to the hospital that she wasn't to be informed. She started fading fast in the year. He made several visits to her, frequently accompanied by his friends. They became her family. The twins and Chloe cooked whenever they visited and made her laugh. I don't want you near me when I go, she had told him at his last visit. The letter was from the same lawyer. I'm sorry to inform you. Roger let the letter fall and looked away. Danged air conditioning. Something in the air made him blink furiously. Megan read the letter and returned it to him. There's more. There was more. Sharon Landis had willed her cabin to him. To my son, Roger Feardon, she said in her will. Roger blinked harder. You going, bro? Buana asked softly. To sell it? No. This one I am keeping. It is home. The end.